Hello everyone, this is TheNelston. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm here to talk about why I believe the Wynncraft 2.0 update is in a currently unreleasable state. So you guys might have seen the news that basically said that the Wynn team was planning to delay the release of the 2.0 update back to early September. And of course their original plan was to get it out by the end of August, although at the time of this recording it is August 30th. So there is no way they could have done that without a lot of issues. And I'm going to talk about a few of those issues here. If you've seen my previous video where I took some highlights from my stream to show just how balanced and stable the 2.0 update was, you might already have an idea of what I'm talking about. To start off, there were a massive amount of issues with the beta process, even going as far back as the first release of the Hero Beta. First, there is a huge problem with items just not being easily obtainable on the beta servers. For example, let's say you wanted to test Corrupted with Alcatraz, because Alcatraz is arguably the best warrior weapon to be using Rage with apart from maybe Hero, which is also another mythic. But let's say you don't own any mythics. Let's say you wanted to test this out, but you didn't actually have access to those specific items. Well, your only option was to ask someone to borrow their items. And if you don't know people in the community, well, good luck getting that to happen, right? Your best shot was to ask on Discord, but typically people would have to wait a long time for a response to that. Your other option was, well, simply to not test that item, which isn't really a good way of conducting an open beta, because if you're trying to get people to test the limits of a certain archetype or a certain class, you want them to use the best items available to see just how absurd something can get. You don't want them to use middle of the pack weapons that might be balanced, because mythic weapons that are top tier, like as I mentioned, Alcatraz and Hero, might be too powerful with the changes that were made. So yeah, basically people weren't really able to test how powerful things could actually get because they didn't even have access to some of the best items to test with. And this doesn't even get into the issue of how getting crafted was nigh impossible.
Okay.
I mean, good luck being able to plan out every single thing you need for beta before you log on. And that's not even considering that people who logged on at the start of Hero Beta basically kept the same character data all the way through the entire process, which has been a few months by this point. So let's say you got a lot of money, which, you know, in a month or two, it's not unexpected for people to earn several dozen stacks, right? Or, you know, maybe a few stacks if you're not that good at loot running or whatever, right?
Money, 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 money.
Even then, you have a lot of new items you could test with that you just simply can't use because you can't have any way of moving them to the Hero Beta unless you make like an alt account, put the items on that alt, have them log on a Hero Beta for the first time, and then drop them off. But prior to the public beta being open, that was just straight up impossible unless you were paying $50 for a hero rank for an alt account. Or, you know, just it still is straight up impossible for a lot of people who don't want to spend $30 just to transfer a few bank spaces worth of items over to the Hero Beta. And I know some people were able to access items because item managers and other CT members spawned them in for them, or, you know, someone even got express permission from Salted himself to get items for free on the Hero Beta. But this is exceedingly rare. I mean, how many people do you know actually have personal connections with the IMs or CTs, or, you know how to contact these people? Because that's another part of it. You have to actually know who to ask. You have to ask them enough times. And actually, someone said that one of the CTs actually got really annoyed with having to spawn in items and decided to stop doing it. It wasn't even workable for 12 people logging on to the Hero Beta, much less 120 on the open beta. So I don't know, what kind of testing are you hoping to get out of a beta where people don't even have access to the best items? Another issue that's come up a lot is the fact that the skill tree requires 30 entire minutes to reset. Now I understand if this is a change that you want to make in the release version so that people aren't able to, you know, swap between skill trees too quickly, but my problem is this: why is that a restriction on the beta testing server? If you guys watched my stream from a few days ago, you'll remember that I literally had to wait 30 minutes between archetype switches. So I had to like play other classes, you know, and I had to do that stuff. And I understand, you know, maybe they want to make it so that you're not just playing one class, you know, you're testing a bunch of other classes too. So maybe while you're waiting for the cooldown on your mage, you go test shaman, and then, you know, shaman, you then go test warrior, whatever. But this is beta. Come on, if I want to optimize a skill tree to see just how busted I can get the damage to be, I should be able to do that with no cooldown whatsoever. It just doesn't really make sense to me that if you're trying to get people to test the entire skill tree, and I mean, there are so many ways you could build the skill tree, why would you make it so that there's 30 minutes between each reset? It just doesn't really seem like it's very conducive to constructive feedback for me. And the final issue I have with the beta in general is that it's just so unstable. And you know, I get it, it's a beta testing server, right? But I swear to God, I've never seen the beta so unstable before. Even when I play past hero betas and just public betas in general, it felt like I could log in without having to get disconnected 12 times in a row. And yes, that actually happened to me once. I tried to log in 12 times and it booted me every single time. If it wasn't for a Java exception null error, it was a disconnected error. And the worst part is that these errors take like 2 minutes to generate each because you have to load in the resource pack for the server every single time you log in. So you had to wait like a minute or two to load into the server only to be met with a screen telling you that you didn't log in successfully and you just had to keep doing the same thing. And it just blows my mind that even after a few days like this, it still isn't really being addressed that much. And I think this is probably one of the big issues that's preventing as many people as maybe the Wynn team wants to be testing all the new stuff. If it is this unstable, I just don't think it bodes very well for the release of 2.0. And I'm actually really grateful that they decided to push back the release date because, you know, if you release the current update and people have to log in 12 times like it's 2v2t just to be able to play the game, yeah, I don't know how long the game is really going to be alive. I think taken all together, these three issues are a big component of why it feels like there hasn't been much constructive feedback for the hero beta and just for the beta in general now that it's open to the public. I remember someone said that Salted said he didn't really hear a lot from guilds. And if you think about it, that makes a lot of sense. When you can't get the best items to test, you know, guild wars with, meaning, you know, you can't do HQs, you can't take harder territories, when people aren't even literally able to log on to the server without giving up in frustration, then yeah, you're not going to hear much feedback, especially from people that have a much better time playing just the release server. The second issue that I have with the 2.0 update is that DPS was buffed way too much. I think the content team, if there's anything they should have learned from the 1.20 strength dex incident, it's that multiplicative bonuses that stack this heavily are never a good idea, especially multiplicative bonuses that stack on top of one another. So if you look at this video from earlier today, someone was using Hero and Rage Abuse, and with an 85k base EHP build, which by the way, is after the 2.0 EHP nerfs, so in 1.20 that probably gets you way more, this build was getting 900k DPS. That is just insane to me, if you especially consider the fact that this was taking advantage, first off, of Savior's Sacrifice, which is the one where, you know, under 50% health, you get plus 30% EHP and plus 30% damage if you're holding Hero, and Brink, which gives you plus 40% EHP under 25% health. It's just crazy to me that this is even something that is allowed to stay in. But honestly, this isn't even the worst offender. If you're looking at pure Earth mythics, like for example, Aftershock, Alcatraz, and I think Grandmother to a certain extent, although that may be a little bit more debatable, these things are getting upwards of 7-digit consistent DPS comfortably. Yeah, comfortably, not like with Hero where the burst DPS is 900k and then, you know, maybe it settles around 6 to 700k, which still is insane to me, but you know, it's still 6 digits, right? These things are getting 7 digits and it's comfortably as well. It's not with a burst. And if you're wondering, well, how is that even possible? It's because, as I mentioned before, multiplicative bonuses. So let's just take Warrior for an example, okay? Corrupted gives a maximum bonus of 220% damage when you're at 1% health, which is fine and dandy. The problem though is of course the fact that this is multiplicative with Rage, which is, plus 396% damage if you have 2 tier 6s on every single piece of armor. That gives you 4 times 99. And then you can go even further and then get Ragnaroker, which gives you plus 30% damage, which is, yes, then even multiplicative with bonuses that you get from things like Axe Kick, which is a specific skill that you can unlock in the Warrior tree. Also, I haven't even begun to mention some of the other things you can do. For example, you could pop down a Shaman Totem and you can get the Vengeful Spirit, and that's another 20% multiplicative bonus. Or how about Radiance? Or I didn't even mention Mage, which if you charge up Fortitude gives you plus 60% multiplicative bonuses. But you might be saying, okay, well, Nelston, not every single class is going to have Corrupted, that's only a Warrior archetype. While that's entirely true, you have to remember that basically every single class is going to have some archetype which buffs the damage by an enormous amount. For Shaman, it's going to be Mask of the Lunatic. For Archer, it's, well, literally everything and all of the skill trees.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is?
For Assassin, it's going to be Shadestepper. For Mage, it's going to be Winded and Fortitude and all that other stuff. So yes, while Corrupted may be a very extreme example, it's not like every other class doesn't also have multiplicative bonuses that go on top of all the things that I've mentioned. But let's not discount the fact that these base abilities are already very overpowered in and of themselves. Someone did the math. Even if you were to turn all multiplicative bonuses, for example for the Warrior Corrupted archetype, to additive bonuses, the build that I showed you earlier would be getting, instead of 180k uppercuts, 120k uppercuts. Yes, that is a big nerf from 180k, but that is still 120,000 damage that Warrior is doing, even with additive bonuses instead of multiplicative bonuses. So even if we don't consider multiplicative, the abilities are still disgustingly overpowered. The problem also is compounded by the fact that a lot of existing content, and I'm not talking about new content like the Nameless Anomaly, but a lot of existing content didn't really see a lot of changes. I mean, for example, Legendary Island, all the bosses still have the same exact tankiness, with the exception of Yayabot, of course, but that's only because he's been removed altogether. And yes, I mean, the content team has made some changes here and there. For example, they nerfed Stonewalker in TCC so that you can't really abuse it that much anymore, but that is peanuts compared to the changes that the new skill trees enable you to abuse. And I'm sure that I'm missing other things here too. I am hyper focused on just things like, Corrupted Warrior and Mask of the Lunatic and all that stuff. If you think about things like Boltslinger, for example, and Divzer being able to do like 1.5 million DPS, I didn't even start talking about that. And so, I mean, come on, like, this is just one piece of the puzzle, and there are so many other things that the Wynn team needs to consider. But I think a good place to start would be by making all of these bonuses not multiply each other, because that is honestly just a recipe for disaster. No, not the level 96 quest where we all know that Bree is clearly the best cook. And I get it, some people are probably going to accuse me of cherry picking here, saying that Rage, for example, is very hard to survive on since you need to be on literally 1% health to be doing any significant amount of damage. Or maybe that Corrupted Warrior is a very difficult archetype since you don't have built-in sustainability. Or, for example, maybe that Shaman with Aftershock and all that requires maybe craftage or requires, other difficult to obtain gear that also reduces your own sustain. But I think this is kind of missing the point. It isn't about how you get to the damage values that's important, it's about the fact that you can even reach these absurd levels of damage in the first place. And I guarantee you, with the right teams, such as for example in the Nameless Anomaly, when you can just have a paladin tank all the damage for you, people will take advantage of these abuses in order to deal absolutely disgusting damage that should never be allowed in a game like this. And that's also stepping around the fact that everything across the board is just better. I mean, you can make Guardian builds now that are very tanky, at least by 2.0 standards, that can easily do 20,000, 30,000 damage per second, whereas in the past, that was probably just a pipe dream.
Can't just...
Also, I didn't even talk about the healing changes, which are just kind of absurd in and of themselves. First off, there's the fact that Mage Healing is more or less dead at this point. I mean, you can do some heals, but it honestly feels like this is more for self-sustainability and for keeping your Orpheon's orbs alive than it is actually keeping your teammates alive. But Shaman Healing is something that we really need to talk about. Because if you just look at this, right? Yes, I understand this is with consumables, this is with, you know, a bunch of different stuff, but look at this build, okay? This is not an okay amount of healing that should be allowed. And the problem that I have with this is honestly twofold. First off, it's self-explanatory. There should not be this much healing from, you know, a single aura, right? Second off is the fact that this requires you to have some of the best items in the game. If you were to attempt this with other, less powerful mythics, for example, or just not mythics, you would not get anywhere near the amount of healing. So the gap between mythics and, well, everything else in the game has just gotten bigger by an insane and ludicrous amount. And I don't think that's healthy for the game. Yes, mythics should be more powerful, but they shouldn't be this much more powerful, you know what I mean? Also, I didn't even mention, this is from a single totem. If you have 2 totems, you get 2 times the auras. And then what's that? You get 2 times the overpowered healing? Oh great, what a recipe for balance. So I actually wrapped up the entire video before I realized I had forgot to make a really important point, which is that a lot of the archetypes are just not balanced right now. For example, Acrobat does absolutely terrible damage relative to the other archetypes that you can find across other classes. Trickster is pretty bad as well. I mean, the clone cooldown is ridiculously long, and without clones, Trickster is like pretty useless, I'm not gonna lie. Actually, now that I think about it, Assassin is just pretty terrible. I didn't even realize. But yeah, like just in general, I think a lot of issues with the archetypes and balancing exist. And even if we're not thinking about damage, even if we're not thinking about all those other things, just how fun it is to play each playstyle and just how viable each one is also a very big concern. And if they don't balance that, again, I don't think that 2.0 is in a playable state. I know what some of you are thinking at this point. Oh yeah, Nelston, they nerfed EHP though. They cut defense and they cut agility, so now everybody does more damage, but they're also less survivable. The issue with this is that the EHP nerfs, in my opinion, were way too extreme. And even if they were like as harsh as they are now, that still doesn't really justify how much damage individual archetypes and individual classes as a whole are able to reach. But I digress, let's focus on the EHP nerfs, because let's talk about defense and agility. I think the best way to illustrate what I'm talking about is to just give you all some numbers to chew on. Starting with 1.20, if you assign 150 points into defense and 150 points into agility, you take 80.8% less damage from defense, and you have an 80.8% chance to dodge any incoming attacks with agility. This would make it so that if you had 535 total HP, assuming you weren't playing any of the weird classes like Shaman or Archer or Mage, which have reduced base defense, you would have an effective HP of 14,473.94 and an effective HP without agility of 2,782.72. Keep those numbers in mind because when we move over to 2.0, the values change dramatically. So defense, now at 150 skill points, only reduces your damage by 70% instead of 80.8%, and with agility you have a 76.8% chance to dodge instead of 80.8%. Now this doesn't seem like it's that bad. I mean, after all, you're only losing about 10.8% off of defense, and you're only losing 4% chance to dodge off of agility, so no big deal, right? But you have to remember, these effects are multiplicative, which means because of these changes, in 2.0, your effective HP with the same base health of 535 is 3,657 at max defense and agility, and without agility, it's 1,785. That is an absurdly big nerf. I mean, you are shaving like 75 to 80% off of the effective HP with agility, and you're shaving, even without agility, a good 50% off of the effective HP. And I haven't even gotten into things like War Scream, which would amplify the differences between 1.20 and 2.0 by like 20%. So what does this mean for the average person? Well, basically because the effective HP multiplier on your base HP is so much smaller in 2.0 than it was in 1.20, people are going to be incentivized to play a lot more of a glass cannon archetype style, even if they don't want to, even if they're not comfortable with it. It's basically throwing to not try to spec as much as you possibly can into damage. So let's say you're comparing two builds. One of them has a little more HP but a little less damage, and the other one has a little more damage but a little less HP. Now in 1.20, it's kind of difficult to choose. It would really depend on personal preference, because the damage multiplier was a lot smaller, right? That's kind of what I talked about in the previous section, but here too, right? The HP multiplier would also be a little bit larger, which means that the difference in hit points would actually be pretty significant. You'd have to actually consider that. In 2.0, however, because the multiplier is so small, you don't actually need to think that hard about which build to choose. You should probably just choose the build with higher damage, not only because there's a higher damage multiplier, because of the things I mentioned in the previous section with relation to them buffing damage too much, there's also just not that much of a difference in terms of the effective hit points. Even like 1,000 raw HP isn't really going to lose you all that much EHP, and it might lose you what, like 20,000 at best? And that's definitely worth a huge damage increase. And this kind of annoys me because as someone that really likes kind of building for people that may not be the best at the game, maybe you're newer to the game and you need an easier build that has a little bit better EHP in order to survive. Well, now I can't even recommend that build in good faith anymore, because guess what? There's no point to choosing it. And so, like, if you look at, for example, some of my earlier builds, like the Anthracite Ballista Tier Stack Archer, that was actually my first build video that I ever posted, there's no point to playing it. You may as well just use Plague Tier Stack. Why? Because what's the loss in HP? It's a few thousand EHP in order for you to gain 1.5 times damage. I really do feel like some of the def and agility changes should be rolled back at least partially, because right now it feels like it kind of locks you into a very singular playstyle, which is that you may as well just go fully or semi-glass cannon, because you basically have the same health either way, except if you lose a little bit of health, let's say 5 or 10,000 EHP, you suddenly double or even triple your damage. Also, this isn't even really considering the fact that, for example, Guardians seem to no longer get defense bonuses when they're absorbing damage reflected upon them from other teammates. I don't know if this is a bug or if this is an intended change. I couldn't find it anywhere in the changelog, but according to some beta testers, this is something that is happening now, which makes wars way worse than they used to be, because now Guardians can't tank as effectively as before. Like, already they can't tank as good as before because now they're only taking 20% damage instead of 50%, but now it's even worse because Guardians aren't even receiving a defense bonus on the damage that they're absorbing from their teammates. Overall, I think 2.0 is a update. Overall, I'm gonna be honest with you, I love 2.0 as an idea. I love the new cosmetic effects, you know, with spells. I love the way that mobs kind of explode into emeralds when you kill them. I love the way that skill trees are set up so that you can actually play a bunch of different playstyles instead of being locked on the same, 4 spells and just doing that. But at the end of the day, there are so many things that need to be changed with 2.0 that I honestly feel like even an early September release is probably too ambitious. I think a lot of things still need to be balanced and changed, and unless that happens, 2.0, at least for the first few weeks or even months of its release, is going to be pretty much a buggy, unbalanced, overpowered mess. And Craft, because of, well, how powerful towers are, and if those aren't balanced, it's really hard to say how balanced the rest of the game is going to be. And, well, as I pointed out already, PvE itself is not balanced too. So, I mean, yeah, there's that. Anyways, I've been rambling on for quite a bit now. I wanted to just bring up a lot of these changes to the developers and to the Wynncraft team in general. If you guys have any other ideas for like issues that you're seeing, I mean, these were my primary concerns, but of course, apart from that, there have been also a lot of other issues I know people have brought up. For example, I brought up my concerns about traveling and how I don't feel like it's kind of being developed that much, although a lot of people don't really seem to care about that. But yeah, basically, if you have other ideas for problems within 2.0 right now, make sure to leave them down in the comment section below, or head over to the Hero Beta section on the Wynncraft Discord and type in your concerns, because I really do think the 2.0 update has so much raw potential. It just needs a lot of fine-tuning and tweaking to make sure that it works properly and is at least somewhat balanced. Other than that, if you liked the video, make sure to leave a like. If you hated it, please leave a dislike. It helps with engagement anyways. Leave a comment if you have questions, or as I mentioned before, you have something you want to add to the conversation. Join my Discord if you'd like to discuss these changes further. Subscribe for more content like this, and as always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.